Hello, classic rock fans. I am reporting a day after seeing 38 Special play at the UW-Milwaukee Panther Arena here in Milwaukee, just after a Milwaukee Admirals hockey game, a game in which the Admirals won. This was part of a long-standing tradition that the Admirals do every year, where they bring in bands to play after a couple of select games through the season. I've been going to these concerts all the way back to 2009 when I saw Styx play after an Admirals game. Since then, I've seen Huey Lewis and the Dropkick Murphys a bunch of times. And most recently, last year, I saw Cheap Trick play after an Admirals game, which was a pretty good show. So this year, the band was 38 Special. Now, I've seen 38 Special before, but it's been a long time. I saw them only once, but it was back in 2011 at the Washington County Fair in West Bend, Wisconsin. It was so far back that Donnie Van Zant was still in the lineup. Donnie Van Zant, I think, retired in 2013, or he stepped away because of health concerns in 2013 and just kind of retired from there. Never came back into the fold. So the band I saw last night was almost an entirely different lineup from the previous show I saw, which was, almost 15 years ago by now. And that means that 38 Special is one of those bands with only one original member. And in this case, it's lead singer Don Barnes. Not that I'm complaining. I'll talk about lineup stuff in a bit, but first I want to talk about the show itself. And it was really good, particularly because of Don. He is an excellent vocalist, he's still singing at a very high level, and he's a good frontman. And last night's show was so good that the emotion I felt leaving the venue was like sort of regret, in the sense that I have passed on seeing 38 Special so many times in the past 15 years because they come to Wisconsin multiple times a year, seemingly every year. They are a road warrior band. They are always out on tour, and I've always taken them for granted or not really noticed when they've been around. In essence, I've been sleeping on them this whole time, and that has been a huge mistake because last night's show was a lot of fun. The music was really good, and I'll tell you this, I won't be making that mistake again. From here on out, when 38 Special comes around my neck of the woods, I'm there, because that was a really good show. I think my hang-up with them is that, one, I never really dived deep into their discography, and two, going back to that 2011 show, I know I had a good time, but I think I wasn't listening very closely, and a lot of their songs probably sounded the same to me, and I wasn't paying much attention, except when they were playing their big hits. And that's to my regret, because that fuzzy memory that I've had all these years, I guess, prevented me from making a point to see them when they've been back all these years. And I should have been going to at least some of those shows, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But first, let's just talk about the songs they played in the show, just to give you an idea of how the set list works. I think this is a fairly static set list. I think 38 Special is very much in the mold of bands like Styx and REO Speedwagon and Foreigner, where the set list is fairly consistent year to year. Maybe they change the order of a couple of songs, but it seems like most years they're playing the same songs in pretty much the same order every night. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. They've found a formula that works for them, and for me, for all intents and purposes, this was like a new show and very much a reintroduction to their catalog, and it was a good one. I was very happy with what I heard. If you saw my review of the Cheap Trick show last year, you might remember that I wasn't very positive about the songs that Cheap Trick played that I wasn't familiar with. A lot of them didn't really impress me, and at points in the show, I kind of lost interest. That was not the case with 38 Special. I did not know most of the songs they played going into the show, but I would say of all those songs I didn't know, I really enjoyed at least half of them when I heard them for the first time. Songs like Wild Eyed Southern Boys, Back to Paradise, You Keep Running Away, and what was the one? Back Where You Belong. Back Where You Belong was awesome. So when I left the show, one of the things I realized was like, this is a band that has a catalog that I really need to explore. I did a deep dive for my podcast series on Molly Hatchet a year ago, and I think I got to do the same kind of thing with 38 Special. Not necessarily do a podcast about them, but I want to do a deep dive on their music and listen to everything they got, because I was really enjoying the music they played during the show. Another impressive aspect of this show was the pace. These guys did not take a break in between songs. You know, most of the time if you go to a classic rock show, they play the song, boom, end on a big note, and then it's like a couple of minutes of them catching their breath, and maybe they talk to the audience for a little bit, and, you know, and then the next song goes in. Not 38 Special. It was like, song ends, a beat, next song begins. You know, some songs segued right into the next one. It was a very fast-paced show. It was almost like seeing a southern rock version of the Ramones in concert, because these were also fairly short songs, and I think at this show I was at, they were playing short versions of already short songs, because the one downside of last night is that it was very obvious that the Admirals had set some strict time limits for how long 38 Special was allowed to play, because this set list was an abbreviated set list when, you know, compared to recent shows that I found on Setlist FM. They skipped some songs, including one I was really hoping to hear. But the show started off with one of their biggest hits, Rockin' Into the Night, and then it goes into Wild-Eyed Southern Boys, and then, you know, my favorite of the songs I didn't know, Back Where You Belong. And then from there, it was deeper songs in their catalog that you wouldn't hear on the radio, but if you're a 38 Special fan, I'm sure you know most of these. And the hit portion of the night didn't come back until the end of the show, but the end of the show was really strong. They did a song called Fantasy Girl, which some people might know. They did a cover of an Easy Beats song called Good Times, and then it was Caught Up in You and Hold On Loosely. And then they did a really raucous version of Creedence Clearwater Revival's Traveling Band to close the show. And that was a lot of fun, and it was very cool to see them cover CCR, because CCR has some serious Southern rock connections. It makes sense for a Southern rock band to cover CCR. And God, Traveling Band is such a great fucking song anyway. I was just happy to hear that one. I suppose this is a good point to bring up the one thing a lot of people don't know about 38 Special, and that's their connection to songwriter Jim Peterik from Survivor and the Ides of March. Starting in 2019, I saw Jim Peterik and one of his incarnations of his bands like 5 times in like 3 or 4 years. He's based out of the Midwest, and him and the Ides of March are another reliable annual touring band. And Jim wrote, or at least co-wrote, like all of 38 Special's biggest hits. Hold On Loosely, Caught Up in You, and Rockin' Into the Night are all songs that Jim Peterik. In fact, Rockin' Into the Night was originally a Survivor song, but I forget who it was. Someone in the Survivor camp told Jim they didn't want to use it because it was too Southern rock, and Survivor was, you know, like an Illinois band, and they didn't want to sound like Southern rock, I guess. So Jim went to 38 Special with it, and that was 38 Special's first hit, and I guess that caused a little tension in the Survivor camp, given that he was scoring hits with another band. If you want to learn more about that, Jim Peterik's Through the Eye of the Tiger is one of the best rock and roll memoirs I've ever read. Very interesting stuff there. Speaking of Jim Peterik, Jim also co-wrote Heavy Metal with Sammy Hagar, and that song was used in that 1981 cult classic animated movie, Heavy Metal. And you know who else has a song in Heavy Metal? A guy named Jerry Riggs, credited as Riggs on the Heavy Metal soundtrack. That guy wrote this song. Yeah, it's one of the first songs in the movie, one of the best songs in the movie, honestly. And it's one of the few songs on the album where you look at the name and you're like, huh, who's that? You know, everybody else on the Heavy Metal soundtrack, I mean, that's the whole point of the soundtrack, are big names. But Riggs I don't know another song by Riggs. Well, there's a point to all this. Jerry Riggs is now the lead guitar player for 38 Special. I guess he joined the band in 2019, and I cannot even believe this, but since he's been playing with them, they typically play Radar Rider in concert, which is fucking awesome. Because, like I said, that's one of the best songs on that soundtrack. So when I saw that was in the set list, and he was in the band, that's when I really started kicking myself. What am I doing? How have I missed this band all these years when they've made that acquisition, and they've brought this obscure but awesome song into their live show? Well, here's the downside to last night. Since the Admirals had such a strict time limit for the band, they had to make some cuts. And unfortunately, one of the songs that didn't make the cut was Radar Rider and Jerry Riggs' guitar solo, which is such a bummer. You know, I understand why it has to happen. I understand the Admirals only have a block of time for whatever rules they have on how long a band can play after a game. And I understand why the band would cut, you know, the solo song from one of their newer members instead of one of their older songs. But that was such a bummer. I was so looking forward to hearing Radar Rider. And this marks 2 bands in 2 years with connections to the heavy metal soundtrack that did not play songs from heavy metal, despite that being the greatest rock soundtrack of all time. That's my hot take. Missed opportunity. Man, what is going on there? And it's not like the band was wasting time up there. Like I said, between every song, there was maybe a second before they launched into the next one. The only time they took a little bit of a break to talk to the audience was before a song called Teacher Teacher, which I guess is from the Revenge of the Nerds soundtrack. Well, anyway, in that brief moment before they started playing that song, Don Barnes talked about how the band is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year, and he mentioned that a bunch of their songs have been used in movies, including Joe Dirt, and when he said that, he rolled his eyes, which I thought was pretty funny. And he was like, you know, you always appreciate when the movies want to use your songs, but my God, you know, some of them aren't that great, or something to that effect, and it was pretty funny. And then he was like, this one's from Revenge of the Nerds, remember that one? And it's like, he didn't even give people a minute to react, and they just started playing the song. But yeah, you know, I appreciated it because they crammed 18 songs into less than an hour and a half, you know, so they were going at a rapid pace. These were like 2.5 minute, 3 minute versions of the songs, and they were just trying to give the fans as much bang for your buck as they could get, and I appreciate that. I'd like to say one last thing before we get out of here about the lineup of the band. While I was watching the Admirals game before the concert, they showed something about 38 Special on the Jumbotron, and I overheard a couple of guys in front of me kind of laughing about the band and being like, oh, there's probably no original members, and what's left of 38 Special, and that kind of shit. And it's like, I get it, you know, 38 Special, this whole era of classic rock, most of these bands do not have their original members. And at this point, it's honestly a surprise when a band does have their original members. So when it comes to bands that don't have a lot of original members left, you know, I guess my expectation is that they just find players who are good enough and who bring something to the band, okay? And maybe that's personality, like Lawrence Gowan in Styx. He's not an original member, but he has a very strong personality. He takes lead on several songs. He's a positive addition to the band. Lawrence Gowan also had a solo hit of his own. It was called A Criminal Mind. And Styx used to add that to their set lists. They've since moved away from it, and that's fine, because I think for the Styx fans, Lawrence has been totally accepted by the fan community. With 38 Special here, I guess they needed a guitar player, so they went out and got Jerry Riggs. Jerry Riggs, much like Lawrence Gowan, has a solo song that some rock fans are going to be familiar with. So they go out and not only get a really good guitar player, but they've got someone who has something in the zeitgeist, something in pop culture, something that they can add to their set list and have as a little bonus for diehard rock fans who would know something that obscure. And that little bonus shows me that a band is making at least an effort to deliver value to their fans. Another example. I saw Blue Oyster Cult back in 2009. And during that tour, their bass player was Rudy Sarzo. Yeah, first of all, that guy's a legend. Well, anyway, Rudy was in Blue Oyster Cult, and there was a point in the show where they introduced him, and they did like this melody of riffs of famous songs that Rudy was a part of.
Maybe you remember when he was playing bass in Quiet Riot.
And that was awesome, because it was saying, hey, this is our new bass player. But he's not just anyone. This guy's been on some serious records, you know? And it's acknowledging a catalog that most people in the audience love anyway, and it's fun. It adds something to the show. So this thing with Jerry Riggs playing Radar Rider at most shows, to me, that's that same kind of thing. It's saying, hey, we didn't go out and just get an older guy who looks the part and plays guitar. We went out and got a guy who has a history in the industry and actually has a little song here that broke through in a bizarre way, admittedly. But if you've seen the movie, it's a good song and it's an iconic soundtrack. And he's a part of it. So yeah, it's just an example of how bands can continue on without original members. If you can't have the original members, you can't have the heyday members, whatever. That's par for the course at this point. So who do you go and get? Do you get someone who's technically proficient but doesn't bring a whole lot else? Or do you make the effort to go out and find someone who can not only play all the parts really well, by the way, but brings a little something extra to the show that you can add to your set list and present something new to the fans who've been seeing you for all these years previous to you going out and getting whoever that is. So yeah, to be perfectly clear, the show last night was awesome. I really hope to go out and see 38 Special again. Hopefully I'll be able to see a full, proper 38 Special show again soon, because last night was a lot of fun. This is a band I've slept on, so if you haven't seen them, don't make the mistake I have. Go out and check them out. They're a very good show. But with that, if you've enjoyed this concert review, please check out some of the other concert reviews I've done on this channel. If you're a fan of classic rock, I guarantee I've talked about a different band or artist you're a fan of. Specifically, if you're a fan of southern rock, I reviewed a Molly Hatchet show a couple of years ago. You might find that interesting. And I've also posted a lot of content on this page about Molly Hatchet. So if you're a southern rock fan, we do talk about that here. Check it out. Otherwise, if you're a fan of classic rock, please check out the podcast I do. That's all about classic rock. Had a phenomenal 2024, and we're off to a great start in 2025. So there's a lot of great content here on the YouTube page, and if you check out the podcast feed, I'm sure you're going to find something you enjoy as well. But with that, thank you very much for tuning in. Go see 38 Special if you can, and keep rocking. Who wants to end the show? No producer.